All right, hello everybody. This is Kubernetes SIG Architecture's Production Readiness Sub-Project meeting for March 8th, 2023. I think we have a couple items on the agenda today. We talked about a few of these things in our last meeting before we decided to cancel it because we didn't have enough attendees, but we did talk just briefly and decided we better talk when there's a few more people. So let me share this document. All right, so the first thing is retrospective. Now it's been a few weeks since the enhancements freeze, so I don't know if everybody remembers, but curious to hear in particular from the shadows how they think when things went, and from everybody, of course. Bless you, Jeremy. Well, I guess to get the ball rolling, since nobody's saying anything, I felt like it went pretty well. I felt the shadow process was really helpful, and there was helpful stuff from the shadows. What I did, though, think is that the shadows need to be more aggressive, or maybe that's not the right word, assertive, in pushing back on people, on telling people, hey, this isn't going to fly. And that's okay. That's a learning process, right? Of learning how to get building the confidence to say that to people. But in some ways, it's easier than code reviews because all we're saying is, like, most of the time, the mitigation or the resolution is for them to add a few sentences in a file. It's like it's not weeks worth of code they have to write. I mean, it might imply that, but anyway, that's the feedback I have. Overall, I feel like it went pretty well. It was more efficient for me, for sure. The shadows did bring out some issues early on. And I felt logistically, or the mechanics of the process, were pretty good. But just the main feedback I would have is for shadows to be more assertive.
So selfishly for me, it worked out similarly. I found that the early review worked well. I agree with the assertive phrasing, that it's okay to come in and say, this is where the bar is. It needs to be crisply described. You need to have some clear criteria that you're looking to have met, but it's okay to say, well, this isn't what we're expecting. We're expecting something like this, and it can sometimes ease the pain if you're able to point to, here's an example where somebody else has done it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I am interested in how it felt on the part of the shadows, and if nobody talks, I mean, I don't know, probably choose a random name.
I can go first, maybe. I'll stick to the questions. How did it go? I feel it went pretty well, considering we have almost 100. I think it's 96 enhancement raised for the current cycle, which is like the most I ever think. So I think it went pretty well, and I'm so glad like we got the process kind of communicated well, because at the very beginning it's kind of not quite clear on like if the approver should wait until all the shadows data pass, or should like they wait until shadows say like it look good to me, or like if we should like do parallel. And I think it turned out like running pretty well. Like we tried our best to like, I guess, have thank you so much for having like shadows did the first pass, so at least we can spot hopefully we could spot something and help like the process running more smoothly. And another feedback, I personally feel like I also raised it in the Slack channel. I feel like the a little bit challenge part while reviewing is to let all the kind of cap owners be aware of the cap template change. I think especially it changed like in a way it's quiet, and especially when like they already got a cap in, and it's so easy for them just go ahead and update all the fields and everything instead of like pulling the new template. Yeah, I assume it will be like unexpected kind of extra action for some of the cap owners, especially for people who trying to promote their features into next level. There are certain questions like cares more than like comparing to like they have like a pretty new alpha feature. So yeah, I guess the communication initially didn't go quite well. Like with the release team head on, I think it's partially also like a release team's responsibility to like for the communication, but also like it will of course cost extra time. Yeah, but other than that, I think I learned a lot, and thank you so much. Also, just by going through like the questions, like everybody raised on the caps, like yeah, I think I learned a lot personally. Thank you.
I can go next.
Cool.
I'll echo that. I didn't expect the template change, and that caught me off on a few of them. I feel like I had to go back and check again. I also don't think I allocated or I estimated enough time for how long it was going to take me to get through some of them. Just felt like that I didn't block off enough time to go
Some of
through
them
things.
take like 5 minutes, and some of them
Yeah.
take like an hour and a half.
And I felt like some of them I had to like go back to previous PRs because things had been updated and not updated and like hadn't been approved since the last time. So there was a lot more kind of like bookkeeping that I kind of expected. So like if I do this again next time, I will definitely know to like backload a little bit more time into things. I think that suggestion that would be more assertive is good. Like I felt like in some of the cases, I didn't feel like I don't know, I was nervous about being more assertive or pushing people too far, but that totally makes sense.
Any other shadows? So a few people joined after. I think just to summarize what David and I both said, and I think Wojciech in past discussions with him said the same thing, that we're pretty happy with how the shadowing process went, but what we would like to see more next cycle is more assertiveness from the shadows to set the bar, as David put it, and be okay with telling people that's not up to the bar, but maybe be able to point them and say, here's one that is up to the bar. Here's what you need to do to make it up. Like, it's a collaborative process. We want them to get through, but we just want it to be at our bar. But
yeah, I would just add one thing that the bar that I'm using personally is also like going higher over time. So I think there are like I definitely see things that I passed through like in the past cycles, like year ago or something, and I wouldn't pass now. And so that also comes a little bit with like the more you do, the more patterns you see, the more you learn, the more you also start to require over time, at least in my case. But I think David, you also mentioned something similar last 2 weeks ago or something like that, right?
Yeah, you get more comfortable doing it. You also get a sense for how much prior art there actually is. And just over time, it becomes easier to say, yeah, this is what we do. Here's an example where we've done it before. And I have found that giving people examples helps a lot. And so we have been able to improve over time. I think the shadows did great, and I'm looking forward to, I'm hoping you guys stick around. And I guess that's also related to the next item when we get there.
yes, exactly. So any other shadows have comments?
Yeah. I feel like I wasn't quite as pushy as I might have been because I felt like I was kind of representing the process and didn't want to be even more pushy in PRR. But it sounds like that there's plenty of appetite for that. Also for me specifically, I think I would have liked to spend a lot more time on it, and I aim to do that next time. We kind of have also had I've been returned to the budget crunch for Kate Semfra, and we'd have to prioritize things early this year, but I expect later this year that will be less of an issue. And yeah, I don't feel good about how much time I spent, but I hope that won't be a problem next time.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. I mean, pushy is one word. Like, I think we want to be collaborative too, right? But holding the bar is good, and it's okay to be pushy in that sense. Han or
Yeah, sure. So yeah,
it's been a while now.
let's see. It has been a while. But for me, my experience was a little bit different. I did allocate a bunch of time for it, but it ended up not taking as much time because like the majority of my caps were like not actually doing anything. So I ended up doing a smaller fraction of caps than I had anticipated. But the ones that I was able to review, I enjoyed the process. It was I thought helpful to go through it.
Okay, I mean, I think one piece of feedback I'm curious about, but not hearing from any of the shadows, is like what we can do better in the shadow program. Like, is there a better way to allocate them, or is there a better way? You know, what didn't work for you, I guess, that we could do better? And if there's nothing, then hey, fine.
It would be nice if there was like a guide to PRR, like not just for shadows, but for people who are writing caps in general. I think it would be helpful for both, right? Because the questions that we're asking are questions that people should be asking when they're writing caps. Right.
Right. That's the whole, I mean, the idea is just to prompt them to think about things they should have been thinking about anyway, but people forget. Like, what would that, beyond the template, so that the template is, so what tries to provide guidance, what you know,
There are, like, I think it would be helpful if a guide had examples, like, hey, like in this situation, this kind of feature involves, you know, like turning on this feature, and then what happens when you disable this feature? Does it break something? You know, like questions like that, and examples of you know, features that sort of exemplify those patterns probably would be helpful.
We should add this in here.
I mean, because all we really have are the questions, and yeah, the questions are great, but you know, I think the value of the reverse shadowing was we saw specific instances of these things, but they're not like completely articulated, right? Like we just, if we got lucky, we saw an example of like this one way this thing could break, or this other way something could break.
Right.
And then we applied that in our, you know, or in our shadowing, we saw those. And then in a reverse shadowing, we applied those.
Right.
So
no, that makes sense. That makes sense to try to like I think we have a few places where like, here's an example of a test, but I don't know how many places we have. Here's an example of why this question exists. So there's two things. There's why the question exists, and there's like a good answer to the question versus a not so great answer to the question, you know, like, or an example of where, I guess that's kind of the why it exists, an example of where a problem occurred because this wasn't done or whatever. Yeah, I think that would be great. That would be useful.
One thing I want to bring up is like the process-wise. Yeah, I understand the ideal process, or like the process what we were trying to do is maybe having shadows working with the cap owners first to get the PR section at least in I'll say ready to be merged kind of phrase until like the approver jumps in and do the final pass. But one thing I noticed during the last couple of cycles is like at least 1/3 or even more of the caps coming up like in last week or last 3 days, it makes it hard to like, yeah.
That's why we try to do that soft trees thing, but like it's marginally successful. I mean, it pushes people a little bit, but
I think like during the current cycle, it's more than a half of the caps coming up like after PRR deadline. I mean, yeah, it's, yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure what to do about that. I mean, we also, it's like we're already taking a week off the cycle, which is a lot, right? And there's not that much time.
Yeah.
It was just everybody's deadline driven. But open to ideas for sure. All right. Well, feel free to add some stuff to the notes doc there. But I think David, is there anything else we wanted to talk about in the retro? Like, I feel pretty good about it. I think the next thing is, unless there's something else somebody wants to read, we'll move to the next thing. All right.
All right.
Dave.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the criteria that we think makes sense for trying to go from shadow to approver. And this has actually been sort of simmering for a long time. And I wanted to throw out a few ideas and see both how John and Wojtek think about it and also how the shadows think about it. I think that a lot of what I am interested in is breadth of experience for different kinds of KEPs and the application of that experience in I don't want to say contentious, in cases where it wasn't all just ready and there might be some cordial disagreement. And so I've thought about a few categories and I want to propose them here. So one category is reviewing a certain number of enhancements at an alpha to beta transition that require coordination between multiple components. And the alpha to beta transition is important to me because that's the one where the answers are required and there is it's actually possible for them to have tried and enable and disable flow. So the multiple components comes to mind. Another one that came to mind is cases of enhancements that require a version skew consideration, both during HA upgrades and with the long running case where kubelets run skewed. And so that would be, you can have kubelets that run up to n-2. And that has a consideration for when and how you detect what sorts of failures you have, and debugging and the like. And then the last category is enhancements that are outside of your primary domain, right? I think I know each of you have things that you're really, really good at, and then a lot of things that you're very good at, and then some things you're not as knowledgeable about. And it can be a stretch, but I think part of this is being able to effectively review things, components that you are not intimately familiar with. And so in my head, those are the criteria. I don't have numbers to put against them, but
I think another category, David, is examples where thinking at scale is important. So like both scale in, hey, here's a large cluster. How does this feature, enable the scalability of the cluster, which I think we have specific questions around. but also where, and this is maybe, I don't know, this is maybe inherent, this is maybe like just part of the process, but it's where your feature makes you think about how would I deal with this at the scale of thousands of clusters from an administrative point of view. So that's one that that's one of the areas, at least I find, and maybe it's just because my biases, I find people often, answer questions in a way that makes sense if you only have one cluster. But if you've got like 10,000 clusters, like I can't use this method of when you need a metric, right? As opposed to like run a kube control command, like that's often an area where I push back on people. So I would like to see the shadows, remembering that mentality. So that's those are two other categories I can think of.
Hang on, that was two categories, not one?
One is, well, it's two different types of scale. One is
Okay.
scale in terms of the scale of an individual cluster. So if I enable this feature and I've got a cluster with 10,000 nodes and, thousands, 20,000 endpoints in a service, what's going to happen, right? Like, and then there's, I've got 10,000 clusters that I have to manage. So the different dimensions of scale.
Okay.
And I think definitely seeing, I think some sort of, they've done transitions from, to alpha or new feature, alpha to beta, beta to stable. I think that we should probably look at making sure people have covered all of those areas too. I mean, I agree that alpha to beta is a big one, but like alpha, for me, the alpha ones are from a PRR perspective, there's not that much, right? It's like, can you turn this thing off? Can you turn it back on and not break stuff? But they're actually the most work a lot of the times because it's the first time you're seeing them and you spend the most time on them. And so it, like, from looking at how shadows are thinking about things, I think it's useful to have to like digest, maybe this is just true of a beta one anyway, but you have to sort of digest that new feature and how it fits into the bigger picture and all of that. But that may be irrelevant to the criteria. That may be just, I don't know, I'm brainstorming here.
I went ahead and dropped them in here. Are there concerns that it's grown to a fair number of I guess some of them aren't too bad. A lot of times you'll have a KEP that does multiple of these.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and I think that like right now I think we're just brainstorming these categories. We don't necessarily have to.
I would like to have before we do the next KEP cycle. I think what I'd like to do is get these. I think we have a page on the community page where we list out what we think good examples of criteria are. And then I think it could be worthwhile. I'm not going to say that a shadow has to do this, but I think that in the next cycle, it'd be worthwhile keeping track of, because the big list will be big. You'll have KEPs that you'll be doing fresh. You'll have KEPs that you'll have done in the past. And they're likely to come back up because, you see the same ones transition between these. And try to keep track of which,
anyway, because they missed the release too.
Trying to keep track of which categories the KEPs would fit into to make it easier. If after that cycle, you guys both feel that you are ready and we agree, I think it'd be great to be able to see that sort of listed out, enumerated, and we say, awesome. I don't know if that's encouraging or discouraging for the shadows here. So if it's discouraging, I'll shut my mouth. But that's where my head's at. Han is very serious.
What? No, I'm normally serious.
Okay.
So, yeah, David, I mean, I agree. I think that that's probably the best way to do it, because I've been having the same thing, is like, how do we know when somebody is ready for to be an approver? Like, I think having some criteria, kind of making sure people have a few examples of each of these that they've demonstrated. And then I think there'll be a, I think that there is an assertiveness quality that's, that's very subjective, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. I think for it's a goal of me and David and Wojciech to get some new approvers on deck in the next couple of cycles. And so we want you to to grow and to succeed into the role, and or to demonstrate, even whether you have to grow or not, for it to demonstrate to us that you're ready for it. Yeah, that sounds good to me, David. It's a pretty good start.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I need to run in like a few seconds. I have another meeting today, actually, in a minute. But one more thing that I would also consider, like extending the criteria, or maybe we decide not to. But like one more thing is the cap that like didn't create, or the cap author didn't come up with like any metrics. I think that's the point where like observability into the features are, I'm seeing most often the pushback from cap authors that like adding this metric will be hard, or do we really need those metrics? And there are like, for example, like for large scale clusters, there are very few caps where like it actually pops up as an important topic. For metrics, so it will also be harder to actually be the approver or be the shadow for those, because there are very few of them. For metrics, I think it happens very often. I'm seeing at least like
point.
a few per cycle that are assigned to me. So and it also checks a little bit like of what we were chatting at the beginning, that like you need to be assertive and kind of persuade that the cap author to actually do something in the metrics area.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think actually you may not miss anything, Wojciech, because as far as I'm concerned, unless there's more comments people have or more.
I think if you scroll to the bottom, Sergey just dropped some stuff on the agenda. I do have to drop in like 2 minutes. So it might just be quick here, though.
Sergey, what's up?
Yeah, it will be quick. There is also another meeting called Enhancement Sub-Project. So I posted a link to agenda from past meeting, and they were discussing template updates in the middle of release. I think Kristen took an action item to actually write a document when template can be updated and like when it cannot be updated.
Okay.
And I also wanted to remind about these 2 PRs, like 1 PR in 1 issue. John, if you still have superpowers, please merge this PR. It's very straightforward.
I do.
And yeah, second one is issues that we discussed. I think Kristen linked another issue. Somebody asked about the same question. So if you can update template right now, it will be before 128. It will be useful. Thank you.
Okay, so you're saying take a look at those 2 pull requests and merge them if they're good.
Yeah, one can be merged. Another is the issue somebody sign up to implement. Yeah.
Yep. That one was, if I'm remembering the right issue, it was mine. I need to clarify the difference between integration and EDE tests and when you use one or the other. And
okay.
I will admit to having snoozed that reminder instead of writing the PR. So
yeah, now it's a good time to update template.
Yes, exactly. And I agree. We probably updated the template. We probably shouldn't have added that question right at the end there, but we got away with it. Okay, so they're gonna set a policy to not touch the template certain time period. Is that the idea?
Yeah. She took the action item on herself. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else, or shall we call it a wrap today? Okay, that's good enough for me. See y'all later.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye-bye.